Imagine living your entire life convinced that what you see, what you feel, and what you believe is reality, only to realize that almost everything you've accepted as truth is a story your mind has been telling you. A story you didn't even write. What if I told you that the fear you feel, the doubts that hold you back, the obstacles you think are real are not facts at all? They are interpretations, filters created by your past, by old beliefs, by emotional memories that no longer serve you. Two people can face the exact same situation. One thrives, the other collapses, and the only difference is perception. Your perception is the lens through which your life is experienced, and most people live trapped in a prison of invisible filters they never question. But here's the breakthrough. The moment you understand that meaning is a sign, not given, that your emotional state determines interpretation, that your past is influencing your present more than reality itself, you unlock the power to rewrite everything. Every choice, every action, every outcome can be transformed by the way you decide to see it. Today is the day to break free from illusion, take control of your mind, and step into the life you were meant to live. Your vision of reality is about to change. Most people live their entire lives believing they are seeing the world as it is, when in reality they are seeing the world as they are. This is the core of the illusion. Perception is not reality. It is a filter. It is a lens shaped by past experiences, emotional conditioning, beliefs absorbed from family, society, culture, and moments of pain or pleasure that left a deep mark. What you call reality is actually your brain's interpretation of events, not the events themselves. Two people can witness the same situation, hear the same words, face the same challenge, and walk away with completely different conclusions. That alone proves that reality is not objective inside the human mind. From the moment you are born, your brain starts collecting evidence to create shortcuts for survival. It learns what feels safe, what feels threatening, what brings approval, and what causes rejection. Over time, these experiences turn into beliefs, and beliefs quietly become filters. Once a filter is formed, your brain starts deleting, distorting, and generalizing information to match it. If you believe people cannot be trusted, you will notice every betrayal and ignore every act of loyalty. If you believe you are not good enough, you will magnify mistakes and dismiss achievements. The world did not change, your filter did. This is why perception feels so real and convincing. Your nervous system reacts to perceived danger the same way it reacts to real danger. Your heart races, your muscles tense, your thoughts narrow. Even if the threat exists only in interpretation, your body responds as if it is fact. That is why fear, insecurity, and self-doubt feel so powerful. They are not logical experiences. They are perceptual ones. The brain does not ask, is this true? It asks, does this match what I already believe? The danger of confusing perception with reality is that it locks you into patterns you don't even question. You begin to say things like, that's just how I am, or this is how life works, without realizing you are describing a perspective, not a truth. You start reacting automatically instead of responding consciously. Opportunities look like threats. Feedback feels like rejection. Change feels like loss. You are not seeing what is possible. You are seeing what is familiar. Perception also shapes identity. The story you tell yourself about who you are is based on how you have interpreted your past. One failure becomes I'm a failure. One rejection becomes I'm not lovable. One mistake becomes I always mess things up. These conclusions feel logical, but they are interpretations stacked on emotional memory. They are not permanent truths, yet they guide decisions, behaviors, and expectations as if they were laws of nature. When you understand that perception is a filter, something powerful happens. You regain choice. If perception is learned, it can be unlearned. If it was shaped, it can be reshaped. The moment you separate facts from meaning, you create space between stimulus and response. A comment is just a comment until you decide it is an insult. A delay is just time until you decide it is rejection. A challenge is just resistance until you decide it is failure. Meaning is added after the event, not before it. High performance. And resilient individuals are not immune to pain or difficulty. They simply interpret events differently. They train themselves to ask better questions instead of asking what's wrong with me. They ask, what can I use from this? Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? They ask, how is this shaping me? These questions shift perception, and perception shifts emotional state. Emotional state determines action, and action determines results. The illusion breaks when you realize that changing your external world without changing your perception only gives temporary new environments, new relationships. New opportunities will eventually be filtered through the same old lens. True transformation begins internally. When you upgrade the filter, the same world produces different outcomes. The same pressure creates growth instead of collapse. The same uncertainty creates excitement instead of fear. Understanding that perception is not reality, is not about denying problems or pretending everything is positive. It is about reclaiming authorship over meaning. It is about recognizing that your mind is a tool, not a master. When you stop confusing the lens for the landscape, you step out of automatic living and into conscious creation. Your past is not behind you in the way most people think it is. It lives in your nervous system, in your expectations, in the way your mind instantly labels experiences before you have time to think. Every moment you encounter is measured against what you have already lived, and that comparison shapes how you see the present. This is why two people can face the same opportunity and respond in opposite ways. One feels excitement, the other feels fear. The difference is not the moment, it is the memory behind the moment. The brain is a meaning-making machine. It constantly scans the present for patterns that resemble the past because familiarity feels safer than uncertainty. If you experienced rejection before, your mind becomes hyper-aware of anything that looks like rejection now. If you experience failure, your mind becomes alert to anything that could lead to failure again. This is not weakness. It is conditioning. Your brain learned these responses to protect you, but protection can easel. Why turn into limitation? Unresolved emotional experiences do not disappear with time. They become filtered. A painful childhood moment can quietly turn into an adult belief. A single humiliating experience can become a lifelong hesitation. A period of struggle can become an identity of scarcity. You may not remember the exact moment it started, but you live the consequences every day through hesitation, overthinking, self-sabotage, or the need for constant validation. What makes this conditioning so powerful is that it feels logical. Your mind presents past-based conclusions as common sense. It says be careful when there is no real danger. It says don't try when the risk is emotional discomfort, not destruction. It says stay where you are because the unknown cannot be predicted. The present moment gets hijacked by yesterday's emotional data. Most people believe they are reacting to what is happening now, but they are actually reacting to what once happened. A neutral comment feels like criticism because it reminds the nervous system of a time when criticism hurt deeply. A delay in response feels like abandonment because it echoes an old emotional wound. The body reacts first, and the mind justifies it later. By the time logic enters the conversation, perception has already been shaped. This is how the past quietly steals power from the present. It narrows options. It reduces curiosity. It convinces you that growth is dangerous and staying the same is smart. It creates emotional reflexes that run your life on autopilot. You are not choosing your reactions, you are repeating them, but the past only controls the present when it remains unconscious. The moment you become aware of the pattern, you begin to loosen its grip. Awareness creates distance. Distance creates choice. When you pause and ask yourself whether your reaction belongs to now or to then, you interrupt the automatic loop. You begin to separate memory from reality. The truth is, the present moment is always neutral until your past assigns it meaning. The opportunity in front of you does not know your history. The person you are speaking to does not carry your old wounds unless you project them there. The challenge you are facing is not a replay unless you make it one. When you stop letting yesterday define today, the present expands with possibility. This does not mean denying pain or pretending the past did not matter. It means recognizing that the lesson has already been learned and does not need to be relived. Pain was a teacher, not a life sentence. Experience was information, not identity. You honor the past by extracting wisdom from it, not by allowing it to control your future. When you consciously decide that the present is a new moment with new rules, your perception shifts, your body calms, your mind opens. You respond instead of react. You stop asking, how did this end before? And start asking, what is possible now? That shift alone restores personal power. The strongest transformation happens when you stop using your past as proof of limitation and start using it as evidence of resilience. Everything you survived trained you. Everything you endured strengthened you. The moment you see your past as preparation instead of prediction, the present becomes a play of choice rather than a repetition of history. Nothing in your life has meaning on its own. Meaning is assigned, and the one assigning it is your emotional state in the moment. Emotion comes first. Interpretation comes second. And action comes last. Most people believe they act based on logic, but logic usually enters after emotion has already decided the direction. When you understand this, you stop blaming circumstances and start mastering the internal state that shapes every decision you make. When you are in a peak emotional state, challenges feel like opportunity. Pressure feels like fuel. Uncertainty feels like possibility. But when you are in a low emotional state, the exact same circumstances feel overwhelming, threatening, or hopeless. The situation didn't change. The emotion did. And because emotion changed, meaning changed. Meaning is the story you tell yourself about what something represents. And that story determines whether you move forward or shut down. Emotion acts like a color filter placed over reality. Fear paints everything with danger. Anger paints everything with injustice. Sadness paints everything with loss. Gratitude paints everything with value. Confidence paints everything with opportunity. You are not reacting to life as it is. You are reacting to life as it feels through your emotional lens. That is why advice often fails. You can give the right logic to someone in the wrong emotional state, and it will be rejected instantly. This is why two people facing the same failure can walk away with opposite outcomes. One interprets it as proof they are incapable and quits. The other interprets it as feedback and adjusts. The difference is not intelligence or talent. It is emotional state at the moment meaning was assigned. Emotion decides whether an event becomes trauma or training, a wound or wisdom. Most people live emotionally reactive lives. They allow external events to dictate their internal state. A comment ruins their mood. A delay kills their motivation. A setback drains their confidence. In doing so, they hand over the power of meaning to circumstances. When emotion is controlled externally, meaning becomes unstable and action becomes inconsistent. High performers reverse this pattern. They learn to generate emotional states intentionally. They understand that emotion is not something that happens to them, it's something they cultivate. They change their physiology, their focus, their breathing, their posture, their internal dialogue. When they change their emotional state, they automatically change the meaning of whatever they are facing. This is not pretending everything is fine. This is choosing a state that produces strength instead of weakness. Emotion also determines the quality of questions you ask yourself. In a fearful state, you ask limiting questions like, what if this goes wrong? Or what will people think? In a resourceful state, you ask empowering questions like, how can I grow from this? Or what's the best move now? Questions shape focus. Focus shapes meaning. Meaning shapes action. It all begins with emotion. When emotion is unmanaged, small problems feel massive. When emotion is strong, massive problems feel manageable. This is why discipline without emotional mastery eventually collapses. You can force action for a while, but without a strong emotional foundation, motivation fades. Sustainable growth comes from aligning emotion with purpose. Many people wait for motivation to act, not realizing motivation is a product of emotion, not a prerequisite. You don't feel confident after you act. You act because you enter a confident state first. You don't feel inspired after results appear. You create inspiration through emotional choice, then results follow. Emotion is the spark that turns potential into movement. This understanding changes how you deal with pain. Pain itself is unavoidable, but suffering is created by the meaning assigned to pain. When pain means punishment, it weakens you. When pain means growth, it strengthens you. The sensation may be the same, but the outcome is completely different. This is emotional mastery in action. When you learn to regulate emotion, you take control of meaning. When you control meaning, you control action. When you control action consistently, your results change. Mastering emotion is not about suppressing feelings. It is about directing them. It is about choosing states that serve your future instead of states that repeat your past. The moment you stop asking life to change before you feel powerful and start choosing power first, everything shifts. Emotion becomes your ally, not your enemy. Meaning becomes intentional, not accidental. Action becomes aligned, not forced. This is how ordinary moments turn into breakthroughs and pressure turns into progress. Every breakthrough in human thinking begins with a better question. The quality of your life is deeply connected to the quality of the questions you ask yourself on a daily basis. Questions are not harmless thoughts. They are commands to the brain. Whatever question you ask, your mind immediately begins searching for answers, and those answers shape what you notice, how you feel, and what you believe is possible. When your questions change, your perception changes, and when perception changes, your entire experience of life shifts. Most people unknowingly ask questions that trap them. In moments of stress or disappointment, the mind defaults to questions like, why does this always happen to me? Or what's wrong with me? Or why can't I ever get it right? These questions assume failure and search for evidence to support it. The brain obediently responds by recalling past mistakes, highlighting weaknesses, and reinforcing limiting beliefs. Nothing external has changed, yet motivation collapses and confidence disappears simply because of the question being asked. The brain cannot distinguish between a question that empowers you and one that undermines you. It treats both as instructions. If you ask a disempowering question, it will give you a disempowering answer. If you ask an empowering question, it will expand your awareness. This is why two people facing the same challenge can experience it completely differently. One feels stuck because they are asking questions that narrow focus. The other feels resourceful because they are asking questions that open possibility. Changing your questions does not mean ignoring reality. It means choosing where to direct your attention. When you ask, why am I failing? Your attention goes to what is broken. When you ask, what is this trying to teach me? Your attention goes to growth. The event stays the same, but the meaning changes. That change in meaning alters emotional state. An emotional state determines behavior. Powerful questions create movement. They shift you from victimhood to ownership. Questions like, what can I control right now? Or what's one action that would move me forward? immediately restore a sense of agency. They pull your focus out of regret and into the present moment. They remind you that while you may not control everything that happens, you always control the response you choose. Your questions also shape identity. Repeated questions become internal dialogue, and internal dialogue becomes belief. If you consistently ask yourself questions that imply a limitation, your identity contracts. If you consistently ask questions that imply capability, your identity expands. Over time, the brain begins to expect strength, creativity, and resilience because that is what it is repeatedly asked to find. Emotion follows focus. When your questions focus on loss, emotion becomes heavy. When your questions focus on solutions, emotion becomes energized. This is why shifting questions can instantly change how you feel. You may not be able to change circumstances immediately, but you can change the direction of your mind in seconds. That mental shift often becomes the first step toward external change. But achievers and emotionally resilient people are not immune to negative thoughts. They simply interrupt them faster. They notice when their questions are disempowering and consciously replace them. Instead of why is this so hard? They ask, how can I make this easier? Instead of what if I fail? They ask, what if this works better than I expect? These questions do not guarantee outcomes, but they guarantee a state of mind that produces better action. Questions also influence perception by determining what you filter in and what you filter out. Ask yourself what's wrong here, and your brain will find flaws. Ask yourself what's working here, and your brain will find strengths. The mind cannot hold both focuses at the same time. The question you choose decides which reality you experience. When you begin to consciously design your questions, you stop being at the mercy of circumstance. You turn your mind into an ally instead of a critic. You stop reacting and start directing. This does not mean life becomes easy. It means you become stronger in the face of difficulty. The most powerful shift is realizing that questions are choices. You are not required to ask the same ones you have always asked. You can train your mind to default to curiosity instead of judgment, possibility instead of limitation, action instead of paralysis. Each new question is a doorway into a new perception, and each new perception opens a different path forward. The moment you take responsibility for the questions you ask, you take responsibility for how you experience life. Your world does not expand because circumstances change. It expands because your mind begins asking better questions and seeing more options where none existed before. Your perception is not fixed, permanent, or inherited fake. It is learned. And anything learned can be relearned. The brain is plastic, adaptable, and constantly reshaping itself based on what you focus on, repeat, and emotionally reinforce. This means the way you see yourself, others, and the world is not who you are. It is what you have practiced. And if it was practiced unconsciously, it can be redesigned consciously. Most people believe that. Perception is automatic and uncontrollable, but that belief itself is part of the condition. In reality, perception is built through repetition. The thoughts you think most often, the meanings you assign repeatedly, and the emotional responses you rehearse become neural pathways. Over time, these pathways turn into habits of perception. The brain begins to take shortcuts, reacting the same way without questioning whether that reaction still serves you. This is why change feels difficult at first. When you try to see things differently, the brain resists because it prefers efficiency over accuracy. Old perceptions require less energy. New perceptions require awareness, effort, and intention. But every time you interrupt an old pattern and choose a new interpretation, you weaken the old pathway and strengthen a new one. This is not philosophy. It is neuroscience in action. Conscious choice is the key that unlocks this process. The moment you pause, instead of reacting, you create space. In that space, you regain control. You begin to ask yourself whether the meaning you are assigning is empowering or limiting. You begin to realize that just because a thought appears does not mean it deserves obedience. Thoughts are options, not commands. Rewiring perception starts with noticing the stories you tell yourself. Noticing the labels you apply instantly. Noticing how quickly you jump to conclusions. Awareness alone starts changing the brain because it brings unconscious patterns into conscious light. Once a pattern is conscious, it is no longer automatic. Choice comes next. You consciously choose a different meaning even if it feels unfamiliar. You choose to see feedback instead of failure. You choose to see delay instead of rejection. You choose to see discomfort instead of danger. At first, this feels unnatural because the emotional charge of the old perception is strong. But repetition builds familiarity, and familiarity builds comfort. Emotion accelerates rewiring. The brain learns faster when emotion is involved. When you consciously attach empowering emotion to a new perception, you anchor it more deeply. This is why celebrating small wins matters. It reinforces the identity of someone who can change. It tells the nervous system that growth is safe. Language also plays a powerful role. The words you use shape the images in your mind, and those images influence emotion. Saying I have to creates pressure. Saying I choose to creates agency. Saying I am stuck creates paralysis. Saying I am learning creates movement. These are not just words, they are instructions to your brain. Your environment reinforces perception as well. The people you listen to, the content you consume, the conversation you repeat all feed the filter through which you see the world. When you intentionally surround yourself with ideas that challenge old limitations, perception begins to stretch. Expansion happens naturally when new references are introduced. Rewiring. Perception does not mean eliminating negative thoughts forever. It means responding to them differently. Instead of believing every thought, you question it. Instead of fighting it, you redirect it. Over time, the volume of limiting perceptions decreases because they are no longer reinforced with attention and emotion. The most powerful shift occurs when you realize that identity itself is a perception. Who you think you are is a collection of repeated meanings. When you change how you interpret your actions, your past, and your capabilities, identity evolves. You stop saying, this is just how I am, and start saying, this is who I am becoming. This process requires patience, not perfection. Every conscious choice is a vote for a new perception. Every pause is a moment of leadership over your own mind. The brain does not need instant transformation. It needs consistent direction. When you commit to consciously shaping perception, life does not suddenly become easy, but it becomes workable. You stop being controlled by automatic interpretations and start living from intentional meaning. The world stays the same, but the way you experience it transforms through deliberate awareness, repeated choice, and the willingness to see differently over time. Everything you experience in life passes through the lens of your perception, not reality itself, not circumstances, not people, but the meaning you assign in each moment. When you understand this, you stop waiting for life to change and start changing the way you meet life. You realize that power has never been outside of you. It has always lived in your ability to choose how you see, how you feel, and how you respond. Right now is the moment to take ownership, not tomorrow. Not when conditions are perfect, not when confidence magically appears. Begin by noticing your perceptions. Catch the stories you tell yourself. Question the meanings you assign automatically. Replace disempowering interpretations with ones that strengthen you, even when it feels uncomfortable. Growth always feels uncomfortable before it feels natural. Commit today to asking better questions, managing your emotional state, and choosing meanings that move you forward instead of holding you back. Decide that your past will inform you, not define you. Decide that challenges will train you, not defeat you. Decide that you will no longer live on autopilot, reacting to life through old filters. Take one action today that reflects a new perception. Speak differently to yourself. Act despite uncertainty. Step forward where you once hesitated. Small choices repeated consistently reshape your mind, and a reshaped mind reshapes your future. Your life will not change because you learned something new. It will change because you decided to see differently and act from that new vision. The moment you choose conscious perception, you choose personal power. Start now.